Welcome everyone to Lunch and Learn Live. I am sharing this into our private Facebook community. Are you in our South Bay Wellness private Facebook community? If you are not, go ahead and ask to be added. On Facebook, if you search for South Bay Wellness private community, you can find us there. And we are now streaming, I think in all locations. Carissa, we're covered. How are you today?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Good. Today, we're going to talk about the immune system and autoimmune disease.
Mm-hmm.
So, what if I told you that your immune system can be both your best friend, right? But when it's imbalanced, it can also be your worst enemy. So, today, let's unravel these mysteries of the immune system, talk about how it really works, what immune balance is, not just like boosting it, but really having it balanced so that we have some long-term health. What do you say?
Love that. I think it's important that you say balance too, because, I don't know if people realize your immune system isn't just about fighting off colds and flus. It's about balance, right? When you're too weak, we get sick all the time. If it's too overactive, it starts attacking your own body. That's where like autoimmune issues come in. So I think that's great focus. Balance. I love it.
Yeah. Most people are always pushing like, I want a strong immune system. I want a strong immune system. And they think that having a strong immune system means never getting sick.
Yeah.
But that's not actually entirely true, right? Because part of having a strong immune system is having an immune system that learns and grows from the things that it comes into contact with. And if we have like an overactive immune system, right, which sometimes I am prone to, that's where you get like allergies or chronic inflammation or even autoimmunity. That's where we have the body attacking itself. But on the other hand, I think people are always asking for a stronger immune system because when the immune system is actually suppressed, that's when we become vulnerable to, serious infections or fatigue or slow healing or things like that. So we really want that sweet spot of where the immune system is functioning at its optimal, right? Not where it's like off the chart, acting like crazy, right? Like a child that's just discovered its freedom, right? Versus one that can't get out of bed. We want that middle spot there.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think most people actually stop to consider that. I think they've always just thought, oh, strengthen my immune system, strengthen it. But we want to, I get it, right? We don't want it to be suppressed, but we really want the immune system to be in that perfect sweet spot there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because, you got to recognize too, we live in a world full of toxins. There's toxins, pesticides, heavy metals, plastics, chemicals, and our bodies weren't designed to handle these things. Right. So I do think that it's normal that from time to time we do get sick because our body is actually releasing those toxins because they tend to overload our system. But like you said, if you're getting like chronically ill, then you're just weakening your immunity.
Yeah. I like to think about our immune system as like our little, our army, our elite defense system.
Yeah.
It's got different shoulders that each have their specific role in keeping our immune system safe. But I want to point out that there are really like almost two sets or two divisions to our immune system, right? We have the innate immune system, that's like the first line of defense. And then we have the adaptive immune system, the one that needs to learn, right? And that's kind of like our smart response, right? So the innate immune system, that's the one that it's the one that acts really fast. It's not really specific. Anything that's coming in, it responds to, whether it's bacteria, viruses, or toxins, or anything like that. And it shows up in different ways, right? Like our skin, for example, is part of that first line of defense for our immune system. It's a barrier. Mucus, so when you get like allergies, that pollen comes in and your body creates all this mucus. That's that first line of defense. Even our stomach acid, which we need, right? I'm always saying after we're past the age of 30, we're typically not having enough stomach acid to fully break down our food. But that stomach acid is your body's first line of defense. That's where,
Mm-hmm.
I might grow some people out here, but let's be real, okay? Parasites are a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are walking around with some sort of parasitic infection. And, they're like, well, where does that come from? Well, one of the easiest places we can track it down is, you're out at the restaurant, somebody's prepared your food, they haven't fully washed their hands, and that, fecal oral transmission is one of those ways. Now, if you've got enough sufficient stomach acid, that stomach acid can do its job and get rid of that garbage. But if you don't, then that's how we end up, actually taking on that infection. So stomach acid is another one, but and you're, we've got what we call natural killer cells or macrophages, which are, part of our white blood cells, part of our immune system that provide that first line of defense. So that virus comes in and they're on the attack. It's like it's like your body's fire department, right? This part of your immune system, this innate immune system, it kind of rushes in and tries to clean everything up as fast as it can. But think about allergies, for example. So there is a place in it's called Santa Rosa, California, a town in California that there was a guy named oh gosh, what was his name? I always forget. Oh gosh, I'm blanking out. He was a famous botanist, and he did a lot of experiments and did a lot of hybridizing and stuff. And so every time, if I am in Santa Rosa in the spring, and I have family there, which is why I know this, and it's specifically that place, if I step into that town during the spring, where whatever this thing is that's probably been cross-pollinated, my body's like, emergency alert, right? And it completely overreacts, causes excessive inflammation, and the snots are just like dripping down my nose, and I have like no control over it. Now my immune system is doing its job, right? That is the innate response, because it's marked this thing as a foreign invader, this pollen, and I haven't isolated what it is. But I could leave and go like 3 towns over and it all clears up. So it's the funniest thing, but the best example here. But that innate immune system is like gone crazy. It's like it's taking the fire hose and spraying at everything unrelentlessly, right? And so that's when we get excessive inflammation. That's when, our body's trying to do the best thing for us, and it doesn't realize that, hey, okay, you're not in innate danger from this thing. Okay, so that's our first system. Our second system is the adaptive immune system. And this is the one that learns. This is the one that's based on memory. This is when, I always joke with my kids when they get a cold. I'm like, awesome, we're strengthening your immune system. Your immune system is learning something new. This is so wonderful. Okay. But it's true, you guys. The more that we're exposed to, the more our immune system, our adaptive immune system, right? This is your T cells, your B cells, antibodies. Everybody's heard the word antibodies before, right? This is where these get created. So it's like the next time that virus or, that bacteria comes in, your body, those soldiers, they're on alert. They're constantly looking for that thing and they're trying to get rid of it. Okay. And all well and good, but if the immune system is actually misfiring, right, it can then actually attack its own tissues. And this is what we call autoimmune disease. And I always tell everybody it's really important to understand, and you've heard me say this a billion times, Carissa, that your body, it doesn't do anything by accident.
Mm-hmm.
So even when I step into Santa Rosa and it's spring and my nose starts running, it's doing that to protect me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now it's my job to be like, hey, immune system, calm down. Let me give you, some quercetin. Let's take some homeopathics. Let's help you realize that you are not really in danger. But it's the same thing that happens with autoimmune disease. And so, I think the next question is, well, how do we how do we really support the immune system? And you and I, we were joking about this before we went live. You guys, sometimes it sounds like we talk about the same darn things all the time, but the truth is there really is like certain parameters that's so important to our health that are those same parameters. It's why we have the True Wellness Framework, because it pulls all of those parameters in, and then we actually get relief, we actually get well, we actually reduce our inflammation, we also, that's there's some truth in it. So our immune system, our innate immune system, it's like the security guards who are at the front door of the building, right? Checking, they're looking, is there anything suspicious? They're getting rid of intruders. And our adaptive immune system, that's like the highly trained detectives. They keep records of all the past criminals, and they ensure that those criminals don't ever do it again. Okay. So that's how you can remember the differences in those two systems.
I love that. I literally had, I could see it in my mind's eye as you would.
Yeah, well, that's what we want, right? Analogies are really awesome for helping us remember some stuff. All right, so I get it now. What do people mean when they say boost our immune system, right? What is that? What are they really saying? And I want to do the caveat, right? That more activation isn't better, right? An overactive immune system is the root to autoimmune disease, okay? Allergies, inflammation, all of it. So what we really need is immune intelligence, right? An immune system that acts when we need it to act, but it also calms down when we need it to calm down. Because if there's too little activity, then we have a weak immune system. That's where we have frequent infections and slow healing, exhaustion, okay? When there's too much activity, right, that's when we have the overreaction. That's our allergies. That's our chronic inflammation. That's our autoimmunity. When we have balanced activity, that's when we have our, our resilient immune system that responds efficiently to threats, but doesn't like attack our body, okay? So the goal is not to boost or to have a super hyper overactive immune system. The goal is to have a balanced one, okay? The balanced immune system knows when it needs to fight, but also knows when it needs to rest. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And I just want to add before we go further, because we were talking about this before we came on too, one of the biggest, most overlooked immune stressors is food sensitivities, right? They cause chronic low-grade inflammation. So like if your immune system's like in constant activation, so you're tired, you're getting bloated, skin issues, joint pain, brain fog, headaches, all of that. And so your innate immune system kicks into like triggering inflammation to fight the perceived threat. And that's something easy that we can figure out, because if you're eating foods and you're having these reactions, you know that there's a food sensitivity there.
Yeah. I mean, part of what we do with our True Wellness Framework, part of what we do with our clients who go through all of our programs, we're going to go through an elimination protocol. We need to start to identify, are there things that are, triggering that immune system like crazy? And the thing is, right, that the gut and the health of your gut is really key to that, because the more dysregulated your gastrointestinal system is, the more leaky gut you have, the more things are getting into your body that aren't supposed to be there, the more those soldiers, right, are coming in to attack. And so, I mean, I don't know, Carissa, I have clients who they'll go through their program. They'll be like, oh, okay, well, I removed gluten, but I just had one little piece of bread on this day. And I'm like, well, wait a second, hold on. So if we're putting out a fire, but then we just put a little bit of gasoline on that fire, what happens to the fire? That fire shoots right back up again. So are we actually having the impact that we want? Because before we can throw a little gasoline, we've got to make sure that that fire is all the way down.
If your gut is inflamed, your immune system is inflamed. It's really simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're connected. And so your brain is inflamed, your mood is inflamed. Like, here we go off on that spiral. So I want to talk about inflammation for a second, because I think inflammation gets a bad rep.
Me too.
Inflammation, is it our friend or is it our foe? I mean, inflammation is actually not always, it's not always bad. It's part of our natural immune response. Think about it, right? If you cut your finger, what do you expect? You expect that all the immune cells are going to rush in to go and help and repair that guy. We want that kind of inflammation. If flu virus enters your system, you want your immune system to activate to fight that virus. Mm-hmm. That kind of acute inflammation actually is good. It does it's doing its job. Now, when we're chronically inflamed, when we're chronically stuck in the inflammatory process, okay, when the body is always in attack mode, this is where we end up with long-term issues. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, we've got to be really careful with chronic inflammation, because that's where our autoimmune disease is. It's where cardiovascular disease is. It's where brain fog is. It's where Alzheimer's, dementia, cognitive decline is. It's where our joint pain and our muscle aches are. It's where the digestive issues are, like the IBS or the Crohn's or the leaky gut, with all of that stuff. That's all chronic inflammation stuff. Okay. And like I said, inflammation's like a fire. And we've got to really control that fire in the fireplace so that it keeps us nice and warm. But if that fire spreads out of control, then it burns down the house. So a little inflammation at the right times is appropriate. And so I guess, Carissa, we need to talk a little bit about, well, what makes the fire out of control? What creates inflammation that just goes wild and astray? Because that's the piece that we all have to watch out for. And that is the things that Carissa and I repeatedly talk about. And I know sometimes it might seem like we're like a broken record, but so darn important, right? Mm-hmm. So darn important. So let's walk through some of those things. You've talked about food, right? So those dietary triggers are big. And what do you see as some of the biggest dietary triggers?
Dairy is a big one. Gluten is another big one, and sugar. A lot of them cause fatigue, brain fog, joint pain, stiffness, skin issues, digestive problems. So it's like when our body isn't performing to its capability, that becomes chronic inflammation. When your immune system stays in that, like, stuck in that, like, fight mode, and it keeps just sending out that inflammatory signal, even if there's no injury or infection.
Exactly. That's where it's the runaway train. The other big piece of it is processed foods. I mean, think about processed foods, you guys. You take in a processed food, your body's like, what the heck is this? What am I supposed to do with this? Foreign invader, inflammation, let's attack, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's just the way that it goes. So food plays a really big role, which is why we are always stressing and stating the importance of how vital it is to make sure that we clean up our diet, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. I mean, okay, if you have some inflammation at some time from something that you ate, you will live, but it's that chronic inflammation that becomes the trouble.
And I think a big one too, which we've mentioned a lot, and I just thought of it, is processed oils, seed oils. They're like in everything package. They're in a lot of restaurants when we go out to eat. And that just increases your oxidative stress and inflammation. So if you can, read your nutrition labels when you're buying food and try to get things without seed oils.
Yes. Yeah. Good. That's the dietary stuff. Another big one, our stress, you guys, stress levels. So if we're constantly in a state of stress, I mean, that is a big autoimmune trigger. So we've got to learn to calm down, whatever that takes. And I know some of us have circumstances in our lives that are a lot. They're a lot to handle. They are stressful, but it's so important for us to make sure that maybe we're breathing, maybe we're meditating, maybe we're just, staying outside in nature, so important. That stress. And a part of that too is sleep. So you need to make sure that you're getting proper sleep if your immune system is going to keep itself under control, And
then another one is toxins and heavy metals. I feel like those can be overlooked a lot, right? Because, we're not really always involved in like the pesticides, the herbicides, we don't always see the mold. We don't
Right.
always see the mycotoxins. We don't always think of like the plastics that we're using to eat with or drink out of.
Yes.
And, those all disrupt your gut bacteria.
Yeah.
These
Well,
all
and
contribute to brain fog and mess
yeah,
with your hormones.
again, they're foreign invaders to the body, right? And
Yeah.
so when there's foreign invaders, the immune system goes in and has its attack response. And so we've got to make sure that we're conscientious. We're not going to live in a bubble, but whatever you can avoid, you want to avoid. Like, it's easy. You don't have to drink out of plastic bottles. I mean, I've got my smoothie container here. I drink out of glass. Um, it's the small things that make a big difference. We're not always aware of all the, environmental toxins like the mold or the heavy metals or things like that. But yeah, I mean, we know that we probably shouldn't spray our lawns with toxic chemicals because we're coming into contact with it, or we should look at upgrading our cleaning supplies because a lot of the cleaning supplies out there contain different toxins in them. We should look at our beauty care and our skincare products and those things as well, because that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think one of the other things that is probably more prevalent than people realize when it comes to autoimmune disease is infections that stay present in the body that aren't dealt with, right? So Epstein-Barr virus, a really big one, can keep your body in that hyperactive immune state. Lyme disease, so prevalent for those of you living in Long Island, right? Parasite infections, like we already talked about. So all these things create that, that hyper state of the immune system. We want to look at, our immune system isn't about just fighting disease. It's really about removing the obstacles that are keeping the immune system from doing its job properly. Okay. And it makes so much sense because I don't know, Carissa, about you, but it's like we're always fighting disease, fighting an illness, fight. Well, what if it wasn't that we had a fight? Wouldn't it be just like pluck those things that were in the way and just, see you later. See you later. It's so much more pleasant.
Even when you say it, it's more pleasant, right? Because you don't have to like drive yourself crazy about it, because the reality is food is the fastest way, right? To either fuel or fight inflammation.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of foods that we can use to help our bodies kind of get out of that chronic inflammation state.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about autoimmunity, because I probably have a little bit of different perspective on autoimmunity than is often touted. I think a lot of people talk about autoimmune disease. You've heard, it's your body fighting itself. Your body gets confused and starts, having that friendly fire. And I always say a little different, so yeah, Hashimoto's attacks the thyroid, rheumatoid arthritis attacks your joints, lupus, attacks different different organs through the body, multiple sclerosis, it attacks the nervous system. And you're like, well, why is it doing that? And I invite you to, again, go back to look at things differently, because your body is not necessarily at war with itself. Your body wants to keep you alive. It wants to keep you safe. It wants to keep you doing the right things and healing and growing and so on and so forth. But what happens is when that immune system gets into overdrive, right? It's like a kid having a tantrum. Anybody ever you ever have a kid who's in the middle of a tantrum, and then you can't get mad at a kid in a tantrum, because if you get mad at the kid in the tantrum only gets worse.
That's very true.
If you're a parent, I'm sure you've all been there. I know I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like that. I'm just kind of putting this analogy in my head together right now, but it is. It's like that kid can't hear you because it's just literally the kid's out of its mind during a tantrum. It can't rationalize and process. And so when we're in that autoimmune state, it's kind of like that, right? Like your immune system, it's not like it can't proper rationalize. It's dealing with all these different things. Like maybe you've got leaky gut, and maybe you're toxic overload, maybe there's stress, and your body's like, I don't know where to do what. Everything is just out of control, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of how it feels, like it's out of control. And so, I always invite people with autoimmune disease to begin to look at it this way. So how do we start to peel back the layers so that your immune system can take a chill pill, so to speak, And I think that's an important part of the healing process for people in their, in their autoimmune place, and think about things like Hashimoto's, where, thyroid receptors are on every single cell in the body. And when we're fully stressed out and we're pumping cortisol like crazy, well, cortisol blocks thyroid receptors. So your thyroid's like, hey, I think I'm doing the right thing. I think I'm doing the right thing. Oh my gosh, but it's not working, right? Because it can't get into the cells because we're too stressed out and the cortisol is blocking its space. So we've got to kind of peel back the layer and take a look at how did we get here? Why is it happening this way? And what are we actually going to do about it to create the change? Again, that's why the true wellness framework is so important, because that's exactly what we're doing step by step by step with our clients.
I think that's a great point because, most often you go out into the medical, field and, they're just kind of suppressing it. Conventional medicine often suppresses the immune system. Like they'll use steroids,
Right.
they'll use other suppressants. And, from this standpoint, we're asking, why is the immune system overreacting in the first place?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah. Let's go into these, right? So really fast, because we have just a couple minutes, but we could probably talk about this for hours. We're doing such a good job. But let's talk about the root causes. So stress, we already covered that. Stress, that cortisol dysregulation, that's an issue. When we're stressed out, it's like you're pushing the gas pedal down on your immune system. It revs up that inflammation. So many people come into our practice, Carissa, right? And they're like, I need to lose weight. And we're like, well, you need to de-stress. You can't lose weight if you're constantly stressed out. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And the more stressed out we are, then the more colds and infections and exhaustion and all of that we experience. Think about it. Imagine, you ever get annoyed when like someone's car alarm goes off and they haven't it's just going off and going off, and you're like, dude, have you not noticed that your car alarm is going off? It's annoying me and everyone else on the block now, And eventually what happens, like if it's not your car and you can't do anything about it, over time, like it starts to drain you. Right. And then maybe you start to snip at the people in your house because you're annoyed that thing is still blaring outside. And this is what happens with your immune system. So, we have often talked about on these Lunch and Learn Lives, breath work and meditation and all of that. That's so important. And then, like you said too, the gut. Right? The gut is so important. So if you've got any sort of leaky gut, or what we officially call intestinal permeability, that becomes a real issue because your immune system is going to be in hyperdrive. Think of your gut. Your gut is it's like a nightclub with a bouncer. And when the gut lining is real nice and strong, it's like the bouncer only lets the right people in, what happens when it's damaged? It's like the doors are wide open and then you've got all sorts of, troublemakers coming in, triggering that immune response. And so that's a big deal. Okay. So we got number 1, stress. Number 2, the gut. Number 3, that's going to be our toxicity, our environmental toxins, our heavy metals, our mold, our pesticides, all those things that we already talked about. Guys, those things wreak havoc on the liver. They congest the detoxification pathways of the body, and those things increase the autoimmune response. And for those of you with hormonal imbalance, when the liver's all congested over here, your hormones can't do what they're supposed to be doing. Okay. And some of these autoimmune flares, they almost like mimic hormones. And so the immune system gets confused. So we need to make sure that we're paying real good attention to that. And then, of course, we talked about food sensitivities, okay, and hidden infections. But you guys, making sure that you've got enough nutrients and the right nutrients in your diet is really key. Because I always say this, we're walking around in our country with so many people who are overweight or obese, and yet most people are starving for nutrients. Go figure, right? Go figure. And so if we can work on those 5 things that I just covered, then you can work on really balancing and creating an immune system that has the appropriate response to things when it's necessary. Right.
Yeah. And people should understand, like, it's a lifestyle shift.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a quick fix. It's working with a practitioner, working with us to kind of help you get to those root causes, because it could be different for everybody. Right. And so the key really is to remove what's harming you and just add what helps your body heal. Just small daily changes add up. And again, it's a lifestyle shift. So just ask yourself as we're closing up, like, what's one small step that you can take just to reduce your inflammation today?
Put it in the comments, guys. We want to know what's a small step that you can take. And I will as well. So we will put in the show notes for today a link where you can actually download our True Wellness Checklist and use that to actually start to help you get all these things back into balance. Awesome. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next Monday.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.